Hey guys, welcome to yet another lesson on THSS technology. Today we're picking off a previous lesson where we added R2-D2 here to this serene park scene. But as you notice, he is really standing out and he doesn't look like he's in the right place. So I think today we are going to do some attempts to blend in his feet to the grass a little bit and add an artificial shadow. So let's get started. The first thing I'd like to do is actually add the shadow, and this is a multi-step process, so let's go through those right now. I'm going to start by going over to the R2 layer here on the bottom right, and I need to duplicate the layer. So I'm actually going to right click on the layer, and we're going to go up here to duplicate layer. I'm going to give the layer a name. We're going to call it R2D2 shadow. Always important to name your layers. And now with the R2D2 shadow layer selected, we're going to go up to image, adjustments, and then hue and saturation. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the lightness slider bar here, we're going to drag it all the way to the left. Okay, that's looking good, and that's kind of the first start of our shadow process. Next thing we need to do is we actually need to place that shadow on the ground. Now what's really important with this is you're looking at existing shadows in your image and try to line up the direction so you're kind of going along the same path. So as you can see here from these trees, the shadows are kind of going from pretty much left to right. So we're going to make sure our R2 shadow is following that same path. So once again, check to make sure you have the correct layer selected. We're going to go to Edit, Transform this time, not Free Transform, Transform, and then we're going to go to Distort. Okay, we're going to get the boundary boxes around your shadow layer, and I like to start by grabbing the top middle boundary box here and dragging it onto the ground. Okay, and once again, as I said, do your best to try and line it up with the similar direction of the other shadows, and then I kind of grab the individual boundary boxes and move them around until I'm kind of happy with its position. Nudging it over with the arrow keys, that looks pretty good, so I'm going to hit Enter. Okay, so we can immediately see a problem here. The shadow is actually sitting on top of R2. This is an easy fix, however, so we're going to go over to the right-hand side of the screen here to the Layers panel. We're going to grab this R2D2 shadow layer, and we're actually going to drag it beneath the R2D2 layer. Okay, and then once again, I'm going to go up to the Move tool, and using my arrow keys, I'm just going to nudge this shadow around a little bit to make sure it's lining up properly. Okay, so next step is one thing we're going to notice, that if we look at the actual shadows in the scene, we can see that they are semi-transparent. Shadows, of course, aren't pure black, so we're going to need to try and mimic this level of shadow here. Because when we go look at the R2 shadow, it is essentially absorbing all light, and that just won't work. So we're going to do this quite easily, actually, by just lowering the opacity of this shadow layer. The opacity is just your ability to see through a layer. So once again, check to make sure you have the correct layer selected, and just above the layer panel, actually inside the layer panel, is the opacity slider. You can click the drop down, and you can just kind of slide it to the left, and just do your best to kind of match the existing shadows in terms of their darkness. Looks pretty good. You can see the grass beneath. Actually, maybe just make that a little bit darker. There, that looks all right. Okay, excellent. Now next, we want to actually blur this shadow out because the lines are too well defined, and we want to make it a softer edge like we see in the other shadows here in the shots. So check the correct layer. We're going to go up to Filter in the menu bar. We're going to go to Blur, and then we're going to go to Gaussian Blur right here. Okay, this window is going to pop up, and you can zoom in a little bit if you like, and then just adjust as needed. Now there's no preset amount that's perfect. You just got to kind of use your best judgment here, so play around with the sliders till you're getting something that looks pretty good. That looks alright there. Gonna click OK, zoom out, let's have an overall look. Well, that's not too bad. It's blending in reasonably well. We're looking about the same color as the other shadows in the scene. Okay, so I'm going to lock that layer now because I don't want to mess around with it. And now let's address the issue with R2's feet. So I'm going to select the R2D2 layer, and I'm going to zoom in at R2's feet. So we can see here R2 is clearly floating above the grass as opposed to sinking into it. It's a minor detail. There's a couple different ways we could deal with this. I'm just going to kind of go for a really quick way. You could spend a lot of time on this if you really wanted to, but I'm just going to make this nice and quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my eraser tool right here on the left, shortcut key E, and then we're going to erase just the little bottom of R2's feet here. But in order to make sure we get a nice soft erase, I'm going to open up the brush options, and what you'll want to do is you'll want to play with the hardness value here. So for example, if I put the hardness up to 100% and try to delete the bottom of his feet, that just looks pretty terrible. So let's press Ctrl-Alt-Z a few times to get that back. But if we lower the hardness value down to around 20% and just lightly touch the bottom of his feet, we can actually start to erase just the bottom a little bit and make it kind of look like he's sinking in the grass. Okay, let's do the same for the other side. Just lightly erasing just the bottom here. And then if you wanted to, you can zoom in a little bit more. You can make the brush smaller. And then you can kind of put a few like errant blades of grass just kind of like going up there. Going to lower the hardness value a little bit more on this one. And let's just make the brush a bit smaller. And just do a little bit of randomness here just to break it up. Zoom out, and that's looking pretty good, of course. Now the sun is hitting R2 on the wrong side of his head, but that will be a lesson for another day. Thanks for watching.